they're great. Yeah.
Yeah. They are.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regularly called meeting for Tuesday, May the 6th. Ms. Hilberg, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilman Kidder?
Here.
Councilwoman Butler? Present. Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
I'm here.
And Mayor Crocker.
Here. If you would, please rise and join me in the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Please be seated. All right, so before we begin today's meeting, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the sudden passing of Robbie Birch. Obviously, this is hard, y'all, sorry. Deeply respected member of our community who made a lasting impact. There will be much more to say in the days ahead to honor his life, but for now, we extend our condolences to his family and all who are mourning this loss. So with that, we will jump into our business for the day, and we will start with announcements and reminders. Mr. Garza.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and certainly on behalf of myself and staff, we share in our condolences to the Birch family, and we're keeping all of them in our prayers. Just a few announcements for you this evening. As a reminder, City Council will convene for a special meeting to canvass the election results this upcoming Tuesday, May 13th at 5 p.m. here in Council Chambers. On behalf of the Police Department, we want to invite the public to join the Police Department and the Victoria County Sheriff's Office for the National Peace Officer Memorial Ceremony that'll take place on Thursday, May 15th at 9 a.m. At the gazebo located in our beautiful De Leon Plaza. The Victoria Police Department and the Victoria Police Foundation have partnered once again to host the annual Foot Pursuit 5K and Kids Donut Dash that'll take place on Saturday, May 17th. The event is part of National Police Week in observance of law enforcement officers who gave their lives in the line of duty. Early registration is available online at victoriapolicefoundation.org. And lastly, I'm going to turn it over to Allison for an announcement of her own.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm very excited this evening to introduce you to our newest Assistant City Attorney, Kevin McKeithen. Please stand up. He got here on Monday and hit the ground running with us. He comes from Huntsville, Texas. He has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to being an attorney for a governmental entity. He previously worked for the city of Odessa. And so if you will all please join me in welcoming him to our team.
They threw you right in the fire, didn't they? I mean, second day and here you are, right? So welcome.
I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Lacey for giving me this opportunity. Came down and interviewed for the position, and came down on Sunday to start on Monday, and have had the opportunity to visit Victoria on my off time, and it's beautiful city and growing, and just happy to be here. And hopefully I can help Ms. Lacy with the city attorney's office and the departments that I'm covering, and with the municipal court. And so look forward to being here for quite some time. And thank you for the opportunity, and thank Ms. Lacy and her staff for welcoming me. So thank you.
Welcome aboard. Good to have you.
Those are all the announcements that we have for this evening. Do I need to repeat that? Those are all the announcements that we have for this evening. Thank you, George. Appreciate you always being on top of my microphone.
All right, well, then we will jump into public and employee recognitions, and I know we have quite a few. Let's see, we'll jump to item 2A. Ms. Hilberg.
Yes, sir. Item 2A is the Apraxia Awareness Month proclamation. So Apraxia Awareness Day was first established in 2012 to bring awareness about apraxia speech and to encourage more people to learn about the disorder and its impact on individuals while increasing public understanding and support of those living with the condition. And whereas childhood apraxia of speech causes children to have significant difficulty learning to speak and is among the most severe speech deficits in children, and whereas while the act of learning to speak comes effortlessly to most children, those with apraxia require early, appropriate, and intensive speech therapy, often for many years, to learn to speak. And whereas without appropriate speech therapy intervention, children with apraxia will have diminished communication skills and are placed at high risk for secondary impacts in reading, writing, spelling, and other related skills. And whereas the impacts diminish future independence and employment opportunities and can create challenges for those with apraxia to become productive members of society if they are not resolved and improved. And whereas public awareness about childhood apraxia of speech is essential for families of children with neurological disorder and the professionals who support them to achieve the needed services for those learning to use their own voice. And now therefore I, Duane Crocker, Mayor of the City of Victoria, do hereby proclaim May 14th, 2025 as Apraxia Awareness Day in Victoria, Texas, and encourage increased public awareness of childhood apraxia of speech.
I've never spoken into one of these before, so mark that off my bucket list. Anyway, I just want to thank y'all for making this possible and highlighting apraxia. I feel like it is one of those motor speech disorders that are often overlooked. And shout out to our two apraxia warriors, Braylon and my son David over there. They're the real heroes. So thank you, and I look forward to just spreading more awareness about apraxia. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we will move into our second proclamation for National Salvation Army Week. Ms. Hilbert.
Whereas the National Salvation Army's only business in the community of Victoria, as everywhere, is still human business undertaken with the joy of the familiar family of humankind, and whereas through sound, innovative, and professional services, the Salvation Army serves the people of Victoria with unshakable faith in all, no matter how desperate the situation, and views all people as people with possibilities. Whereas the Salvation Army acts on behalf of all residents of our community with neither salvation nor any other condition prerequisite and not expecting any thanks, yet nonetheless welcoming community support. Now, therefore, I, Duane Crocker, Mayor of the City of Victoria, Texas, proclaim May 12th through 17th, 2025 as Salvation Army Week in Victoria, Texas, and do urge all citizens to join in saluting the steadfast men and women who bind up the brokenhearted and renew the heart of the community by their quiet service of compassion.
I don't think Captain Jones could make it this evening, but we'll make sure he gets a proclamation and give him another opportunity to come in and address, because I know he always likes to be here and talk about all the good work they do over there. So let's join me, if you would, in praising Salvation Army for Salvation Army Week. And then finally, item 2C is Public Service Recognition Week proclamation. Ms. Hilbert.
Whereas the people of the city of Victoria are served every single day by public servants at every level of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government, these unsung heroes do the work that keeps our community working. And whereas public employees take not only jobs, but oaths to perform their jobs to the best of their ability, and whereas public servants, including military, reserve personnel, police officers, firefighters, corrections officers, doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, and others risk their lives each day in service of the people of the city of Victoria, and whereas public servants, including teachers, social workers, administrators, computer technicians, laborers, and countless other occupations, day in and day out, provide with efficiency and integrity the diverse services demanded of their government by the people of the city of Victoria. And whereas without these public servants at every level, continuity would be impossible in the democracy that regularly changes its leaders and elected officials. And now, therefore, I, Duane Crocker, Mayor of the City of Victoria, do hereby proclaim the week of May 4th through 10th, 2025 as Public Service Recognition Week. All citizens in the City of Victoria are encouraged to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of the hardworking and deserving public employees of the City of Victoria, Texas.
I have a 30-minute speech prepared. Thank you. Mayor and council, thank you so much for taking a minute to recognize the hardworking men and women of our organization. I say at every new employee orientation that it's impossible for us to enhance livability in our community without them. Every single individual in our organization plays a significant role in making our community a better place to live, whether it's, of course, the public safety personnel or solid waste truck drivers that pick up trash, or our community appearance division that helps ensure that our community looks great, our parks team, of course, that helps ensure that we have great quality of life with our parks, and the list goes on and on. And one of the things that we specifically are trying to be mindful of for this particular week is trying to celebrate our unsung heroes, because we recognize that we have certain individuals in our organization that are in positions that most people recognize, right? Because they see them on TV, in movies, or they see them driving around. But we have a lot of individuals in our organization that do amazing work behind the scenes. And so I'd like to share with you an example of something that happened last week where we saw a perfect example of what we truly mean by our unsung heroes. And this is related to an issue that came up last Tuesday, April 29th. In the afternoon, there was a report that there was an issue at our surface water treatment plant, which, as you know, is our sole source of water, and that there was an issue with a 3-foot raw water line that directly feeds into the plant. And without getting into the science of it, the point is that there was an issue with this line that forced the plant to shut down on Tuesday afternoon. And that's obviously a problem, right? Because we need water. Waters are the lifeblood of our community. We often joke that people take it for granted, right? Because it comes out when we turn on our faucets and everything else. But this was a serious issue, and it was an issue that evolved into the late evening hours, to the point to where we began to prepare for a pretty severe catastrophic event. We were basically preparing for a scenario where people would wake up that following morning on Wednesday, April 30th, and there'd be no water coming out of the faucet when it came out. By the estimations of our surface water treatment plant staff, they calculated that they probably had until 5 or 6 a.m. to get the water back online in order for there to not be an issue. And I happened to be out there for a few hours late into the evening to just do my part in showing support, but I was very, very impressed with what I saw. Our public works director was out there, our utility supervisor was out there, and quite a bit of employees, and I'm going to list them by name here shortly, were out there tackling this issue. And I was very impressed and amazed at their collaboration, their teamwork, and how serious they took it. And sure enough, they were able to get the water plant back online at 4 a.m. Just at the nick of time. And nobody, unless me telling this story now, people would never realize that we averted a pretty significant issue in our community thanks to our unsung heroes of our surface water treatment plant and our utility division. And so I'd like to very briefly just call them out by name. They're not here. They're working on the water plant. But from our utilities division, Santos Ibarra, Mark Gaitan, Lawrence Love, Carlos Dorr, Mark Baladez, Jeffrey Lemons, Jacob Batson. From our surface water treatment plant, Kevin Post, Curtis Moyer, Gordon Williams, Harris Waste, Vivian Villegas, Daniel Ortiz, Patricia Garcia, Douglas Elliott, Austin Enfroy, Matthew Stutzman, Todd Hoff, and Irma Ruiz. And of course, I mentioned Ken and Greg already. And these individuals, they, like, as I said, it's truly exemplified what we're trying to celebrate this week, which is our unsung heroes. And I'll leave you with a quote that was mentioned to me by one of the supervisors that evening, because I couldn't fathom, the pressure that those employees might have felt, being in the hole, trying to address this issue, contemplating that, the time was against the clock, right? Their back was against the wall, per se. And one of the supervisors, when I alluded to, this must be a very high pressure situation, literally looked me dead in the eye and said, pressure? This isn't pressure. We're simply just trying to make sure that our families have water when they wake up. And made it sound like the most normal thing in the world that they were out there at 3 a.m. Working on this issue. And so those are the types of individuals that work for our organization, and these are the types of individuals that we want to take a moment this week to thank and to show our appreciation for. And as part of that, like we do every week of this to celebrate Public Service Recognition Week, we of course have the big luncheon on Thursday at the Community Center, which I hope you receive the invitations, and we hope that you can make it. And we have events sprinkled out throughout the week to show our appreciation. And even though this is something that we try and be more visible of this week, obviously we are grateful for the men and women of our organization 365 days a year. And so this isn't, this is just a little snapshot, right, of that. And so again, thank you so much for the proclamation. And I hope that you and everybody tuning in can help us celebrate this week all the unsung heroes that work for the city of Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garza, and obvious thanks for everyone for all of those involved in that incident. When you texted at 3 a.m., I was very relieved, very relieved to get that text. So thanks to all of you. All right. Let's see, item B2D is our KVB Beautification Award for May.
And Daryl Lisak's going to handle this item.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mr. Lisak.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So Christy's at a conference, so I want to thank everybody that came out on Saturday and helped with the cleanup. It was a big success, so thanks to everyone that was able to show up and help out cleaning up several areas around the city of Victoria. And with that, for this month's award, I'm going to let Meredith Bird, the current chair of waste of Keep Victoria Beautiful, come up and tell us about the winner this month. Meredith?
Welcome, Ms. Bird.
Thank you. And before I get started on this, I wanted to extend a thanks from Keep Victoria Beautiful to everyone who came out on Earth Day and supported our fundraiser. It was a rousing success, and all of the money that was raised, we're going to put right back into the community with undertaking a new public art project to be determined, and also expanding our beautification grant program that's available to local businesses. So we're just happy to continue in with the beautification of Victoria. And so without any further ado, I'd like to talk about this month's beautification award. We had a few nominations, and for May, our committee recommended A1 Climate Controlled Storage on Main Street, which it's a beautiful little property. Not a whole lot of green space, but if you're driving down Main before you get to in between Rio Grande and Red River, it's a nice little building that always has a festive seasonal display on the steps. There's usually colorful flower pots, maybe little banners and such for whatever season. And Ms. Byrne does a fantastic job of working with what she has. Not a lot of area for, big trees and landscaping and all of that, but it's a really eye-catching little property on there on Main Street. And I know she's going to get up and talk to you about the history of it. It's got a really interesting little history. And so tonight I'd like to congratulate Francie Byrne of A1 Climate Controlled Storage on our May Beautification Award. You're welcome. It's all yours.
Thank you, Council and Mayor and Council, sorry. Thank you. My name is Francie Strain Byrne, and I am very proud of that building. My grandfather built that in 1950. It was the first Dr. Pepper bottling and distributor in Victoria and all the little stores back in the day. And my grandfather sold the franchise in 1973, but held on to the building. And he leased it to Goodwill. And after that, it was Habitat for Humanity, and several mechanics leased it. And in 2013, I was very happy to open up climate control storage units in there. And it warms my heart to still be in that building. And now my grandchildren run around in there. And that's 5 generations being in that building. I want to thank all those that nominated and voted for A1 climate control storage units. And we are, it's 24-hour access in there. It's small. I know all my customers by name. They know me. It's just I like to keep it small and family kind of oriented. And I thank you all again. Family's very happy.
Great. Congratulations, Ms. Clark. All right, and then, let's see, item B2E, recognition of the 2024-2025 Mayor's Youth Council. That has my name on it, so I will take that. You guys see the young men and ladies out in the audience there. This is my youth council for this year. I felt like a college coach. This is my first recruiting class. That was all mine. So, no, really a great group. They learned a lot you'll hear a little bit more, but I think hopefully you learned a lot through this program, and each of them contributed to the discussions, and we did a lot of cool stuff. So we want to recognize them. And just so those that may not know about the Youth Council, it's comprised of high school juniors and seniors from the various high schools within Victoria County. I think we had somebody from just about all of them. So just a really great group. And so if you'll indulge me, I want to hand out their certificates and letters of recommendation for each of them. Yep, that works.
All right, our first student up is Amanda Budd. Everyone. Emily Craig could not make it tonight. Next we have, and neither could Peyton Emerson. We have Paige Fulgham. Next is Mercedes Garza. Reed Gomez. Avery Harriman. Elena Longoria. Lauren Montgomery. Cammie Mueller. Michael Shopper. And then Luke Shopper. Sierra Thomas. Haley Thurman. J.C. Valdez. And last but not least, Eliana West.
they'll be providing an update here shortly under items from council.
Yes, so I will jump right into that while we're on the topic. So items from council, I have an item that's obviously related to our Mayor's Youth Council, and I'd like I asked them to give you guys just a recap of kind of what we did in the program this year. And so Keisha, take it away.
I'll start. Greetings, Mayor and Council. This year's Youth Council is the largest that we've had so far. After the third year of doing this, we also had a group of students who were not part of originally founding the group, which was really exciting to see the legacy of the original students who started the Mayor's Youth Council continue on and grow beyond the one school that it kind of started out at. And so our group this year has been able to do some fun things and learn things, and they have a short recap for you. And I will start with Luke Shopper, our president.
Does it go to the next slide, or?
It's going to go on the screen.
Oh, gotcha. So the mission of the Mayor's Youth Council is to promote civic engagement among youth. The Mayor's Youth Council provides high school students with opportunities to learn about city government, develop leadership skills, and bring awareness to issues important to Victoria's youth. The NYC is made up of junior and senior high school students representing the youth population of Victoria and is open to students from VISD, St. Joseph, Faith Academy, Industrial ISD, Bloomington ISD, and other homeschooled students.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Sierra Tamez and I'm the 2024-2025 President-elect. So the eligibility requirements to be a part of the Mayor's Youth Council is students must be a junior or senior in high school, commit to serving for 1 school year, which starts in the beginning of August to May, submit a completed application, maintain a 2.5 GPA or higher, attend orientation, attend and actively participating in monthly meetings, and also participate in many community service projects.
The 2024-2025 Mayor's Youth Council has 16 students, and 9 are seniors, 7 are juniors, and they are all from 4 different schools.
We've generally met twice a month on Tuesdays since August. At our meetings, we have learned a lot about the city from the different departments. We also start each meeting watching the rundown, so we have followed what the city council does.
The 2 service projects we've done this year is we were able to volunteer at Tejas Fest, and we did volunteering for Keep Victoria Beautiful.
We also took 2 field trips to Fire Station Number 1, where we explored the fire trucks and got to learn about the CPR basic training, and also to the public safety headquarters that is being built.
We worked with staff on drafting a public art policy, and we learned that public policies have a why, a purpose, and an objective. And after those are established, then you can start drafting the policy.
In our discussion of the public art policy, we discussed a lot of details, but most specifically focused a lot of discussion on administrative responsibilities of departments responsible for implementing the policy, public notice requirements, and how to gain public participation.
We want to thank you for the opportunity, especially to Keisha Smith for coordinating our meetings, and to Mayor Duane Crocker for hosting the Mayor's Youth Council part of last year and all of this year. Thank you.
Great job, guys. Have really enjoyed it. And I too want to thank Keisha for all of her work that she's done. And for those of you that are juniors, hopefully we'll see you back next year. And good luck on finals, guys.
Yes, and I want to say to anyone listening or watching that we're going to hopefully open up applications in the next few weeks for next year's youth council. They're not due until August, but that way students have time to get recommendation letters and make sure it fits in their schedule. But for now, we're going to leave because I did promise this group that we would go to Green Cow after this, so we have to go.
Hey, whoa, do I get to go? No.
We have an executive session.
Great job, y'all. All right. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I believe we may have another item from council. Ms. Scott?
Yes. This is really as much public service, public information as anything. But I've become aware that there is a bat population in Eagle Creek, and some of the bats are rabid. They do have rabies. They can be seen flying on Ashland Creek early in the morning. But there have been at least 2 incidences I'm aware of where people have come in contact with the rabid bats, and you know what happens as a result of that. They get in touch with animal control, get in touch with public health, end up taking the rabies shots. Their pets also quite often have to, be treated in various ways. So I wanted to make the public aware of it, because that is probably the biggest defense that any of us can have, is to be aware that there are bats in the area that have rabies. And for those not as familiar with the city and the location, Eagle Creek is a subdivision on the east side of town, and it is immediately adjacent to Fleetwood, to Hamlet Place. Cimarron's in the area, Tangerine is in the area. So a lot of residential areas, because of course the bats don't stay in one subdivision. So I wanted to make the public aware. The biggest thing is to keep your distance. If you see an animal on the ground, don't go investigate it. Contact animal control, but just be aware not to have contact yourself.
Great, thank you. And I think I saw Mr. Sloot.
He's here.
Oh, great.
I think he was here. Yes.
I may have stolen his thunder, but
Welcome,
thank you.
welcome.
Thank you for coming.
Certainly want to give you opportunity to address citizens on this issue.
Oh, I appreciate it. Mayor and council, glad to be here. I do appreciate her need for knowledge, and I just wanted to explain that Texas is home. I sent her a whole bunch of information. She probably knows more about rabies and bats now than she ever wanted to. We are home to 33 different species of bats. They're the most populous mammal actually in the world. And we have the 3 largest bat colonies in the world are in Texas. So keenly aware of bats. It's where all rabies investigation started, was actually in Texas. In Austin and San Antonio is the main mecca of all knowledge of rabies. So so far this year, we've had 2 positive bats and 2 positive skunks. We actually just had a positive skunk at the animal control facility. And so, again, this is a prime opportunity to explain to people that by state law, your cats and dogs and ferrets 4 months of age or older have to be vaccinated for rabies. If you remember back in 2023, we had an outbreak of skunk rabies. First time in about 12 years we'd had skunk rabies in our county. And we were actually mentioned, as I put in the email, in the 2023 review of zoonosis control, Victoria County Animal Services, Victoria County Public Health, and zoonosis control's reaction to that actually kept people safe. It was a model of exactly what we should have done through public education, lots of press releases by me, and public health, and just sharing of information. It's surprising that we have, clinics, they don't deal with rabies all the time. So if somebody comes in saying they got bit by something that might be rabid, we are the person they call. So just again, I'm just here if you guys need any information on rabies. We obviously can't remove the whole bat colony. Generally about 10% of bats tested in the US come back positive for rabies. When I was in Austin, we had 1 year where 52% of what we tested were positive. Williamson County and Travis County lead the nation in rabies. So be glad you're down here. We don't have it as bad. But again, as the council member said, we don't ever want to touch wildlife if we see it on the ground. If you go to my Facebook page, there's a video of the skunk that was falling over, tipping over as it was walking by our facility. That's a classic sign of out during the day, an animal that should only be out at dusk and dawn, and peculiar behavior such as falling over, spraying with its tail down instead of tail up, unusual behavior. Any bat that you see down shouldn't be touched. If your dog handles it or whatever, this lady that we're talking about, this person got vaccinated, her dog had to get vaccinated. And that starts a whole chain of events within the state and the city and the county when somebody is exposed to rabies. So again, everything was done very well this time. The reports were done accurately and appropriately. And she did seek the medical, necessary medical things that she did. So again, I'm available if any of you want any information. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. And I'm always happy to meet with you and talk about whatever concern you have with animals.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sloat. Appreciate you being here. And thank you, Ms. Scott, for bringing that to the public's attention.
Thank you.
Are there any other items from council this evening? All right. With that, then, we will move into citizens' communications. I have 4 cards here, and we'll start with Michael Vondera. Welcome, Mr. Vondera.
Good evening, council, mayor. I enjoyed the Cinco de Mayo this weekend. The city of Victoria put together. Appreciate it, and congratulations on being mayor. You still have your job, so that's good, And anyway, they're laying concrete at 2204 East North Street. I'd like to thank Rick Madrid and stuff for overseeing it with the city of Victoria. I've been complaining about potholes for 6 years, and it's finally being fixed, and I appreciate it. And the personal injury attorney's not doing the asphalt. He's going high level and doing the concrete. So I appreciate what the personal injury lawyer is doing for the trailer park. And also there's trailer 29. It's all dilapidated. I don't know if they could call it a public nuisance and stuff, but the roof is falling apart. There's about 14 broke windows, broke doors, and this been like this for about 3 years, and the personal injury lawyer hasn't done anything. If a tenant lived like that, you would be evicted more than likely, And the law should apply for the personal injury attorney who owns the trailer park, not just the tenants. If he's going to evict you, if you have something wrong with your trailer park, there should be some repercussions from the city of Victoria. And back in 2010, a gangster came and they killed someone in that trailer house. It was shot 3 times. He got 99 years, and the other one that wasn't a trigger man got 10 years. No, he got 20 years, because he didn't use the weapon, And whenever you leave trailer houses dilapidated and you turn a blind eye and don't fix it up, you can expect things like that to happen. And trailers 5, 10, 16, 29, and 32 were condemned about 3 years ago, but they gave them a chance on 29 and 32 because they did fix them up, but they're not up to par and not up to code. And I would like someone to tell the personal injury lawyer about it and stuff. And, also, I'd like to thank the SWAT team on the drug bus and the place where they got busted. They added some more cameras and stuff. So when you're the police, they're looking at you through the camera. And a tenant said there was 3 shots on 3 separate days in the trailer park. And I would like the personal injury lawyer to do background checks on the people. There's a lot of sketchy people. And I'd like to thank everyone, the city of Victoria, for helping both the city managers before Jesus and the other one. Thanks, and have a good one. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Vondera. Next, I have Mr. Harley Fisk. Welcome back, Mr. Fisk. Always good to see you.
Everyone here? All right. Couple things tonight. First, I'd like to congratulate the city as a whole on the results of the election on the community center. And of course, you getting reelected. All right. The Friends of the Library begins our 3-time-a-year book sale on Sunday. All right. Sunday, it's for members only, but it only costs $10 to join, to be a member. That's from from noon till 2. The funds that we raise during the library book sale goes into supporting programs at the library, including my favorite program, which is the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten. We're trying to get parents to read to their children more to help with the whole problem of literacy in Victoria, which actually is an endemic problem throughout the country. Also, on behalf of Theater Victoria, and I'm sure the mayor would be pleased to audition for Footloose.
That sounds like a disaster.
Thursday, May 22nd is the auditions, the actual play dates of the theater itself, July 25th to 27th, and July 31st to August 3rd. But we encourage people to come out both to the library book sale and to the auditions for Footloose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisk. Next card I have is Mr. James Weirden. Good evening, Mr. Weirden. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is just an update on behalf of Victoria Preservation. We have been working probably over the course of the last year to try to save Anchor Lumberyard, which was in risk after the developer of the new Dollar General decided to buy that property. So we came to you early. We came to the city and we came to the developer. And I guess bottom line is we were able to save that building. And in the meantime, we got new development out there. We got a DG Market. We got fresh meat and produce on the south side of Victoria, which was a big win because we haven't had that in decades. And the bigger thing for us at Preservation was the Kai Leflin structure was saved. And thanks to your leadership, and especially to Councilwoman Scott, who helped us with this project, just a big kudos and thanks. Our development director, Julie Fulgham, and our building official, Rick Madrid, were instrumental in doing things to make that possible because we went out of our comfort zone to save a building that actually sits in the right-of-way. But I think it's a win for the city. Preservation is important in Victoria. We have so many historic structures, and it gives us a sense of place to our community when we save these structures and they're repurposed. Because if we lost the Anchor building, we'd have a piece of concrete. Now we've got a building that's going to be restored by a private investor and being reutilized. So we're grateful for that. And just want to say to y'all, let's keep up the forward progress on preservation in Victoria. There's going to be a lot of opportunities, I can tell you right now. There is interest from outside the city in doing some things with historic buildings in Victoria. So I just ask that y'all keep an open mind, keep that idea of preservation and how do we repurpose all these structures that we have that are so significant to our community. And I'm just grateful to the Development Office and to y'all for making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weirden. Appreciate it.
I want to recognize John Caselas and Bill Murphy, who worked with preservation and were instrumental in helping us move forward.
Thank you. Appreciate the work VPI does in the community. And then my last card is Mr. John Griffin. Welcome, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I echo James Weirden and want to thank you and the city staff for all of the hard work in seeing what was Dick's West End end its run as a Dollar General store and end up with what I think many of us would say is probably the most beautiful Dollar General store in the world. So thank you for the partnership in working with VPI and the Victoria County Historical Commission, of which I am a member, because that project, albeit one against long odds, people wouldn't have bet that this would have happened. But we've saved a beautiful architectural specimen from the son of Jules Leflin, Kai Leflin. And as you know, our old county jail is also a Kai Leflin structure that we're working to make sure is not demolished and is repurposed. So thank you for all of that. Not every project comes to fruition, but thanks to the hard work of the people in this room and others who worked behind the scenes, it is now a project everyone in this community can be proud of. Last, I know I'm not the only one to feel this or sense this, and you saw this a little bit in our mayor's reaction to this, but the passing of Robbie Burge last night is weighing a lot of us down in this community. It was a real shock since he was such an irrepressible, undeniable force of nature with a positive attitude. I've got goosebumps now missing those phone calls that we would get from him and his creative energy. It's a real shock. He leaves us, though, with a legacy of kindness, positive thinking, and warm personality. But the one that stands out to me this afternoon is his ability to say yes to projects that improve our community. I made a lot of asks of Robbie in his life, and he never said no. If we were working on a project, he was there to do it. And for all of us who will enjoy the 50th Bach Festival this year, his family, again, is a major supporter of that effort. And so if I could take anything from what Robbie's legacy leaves, it's the ability to say yes when something good is happening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, John. All right. I think that will close out then citizens communication, and we will go to item C, which is item C1. This is item of public hearings. Ms. Hilbert.
Item C1 is an ordinance amending Chapter 24 of the City Code for Fire Department fees. This item is on first reading.
No presentation tonight, but good evening, Mayor and Council. This item is just reverting one of the fee changes that were made, I believe, back in February or March, related to the fire department. They had a fee for the crowd manager on site that had been adjusted to $75 an hour, which we're reverting back to the original rate to keep it more in line with what the police department is charging for related fees. So that's all that this item is tonight.
Okay. Any questions? No? All right. Thank you very much. So with that then, I will open the public hearing on item C1. If there's anyone who wishes to address council, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain any motions with respect to item C1.
Motion to approve. Item
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item C1 passes. Item D then, we'll move to the consent agenda. Ms. Hilbert.
Item D1 is the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting held on April 15th, 2025. Item D2 is a resolution approving the purchase of a 2024 Ford F-550 Skeeter flatbed brush truck from Siddons Martin Emergency Group, LLC, in the amount of $160,348. Item D3 is a resolution approving a contract extension with AGCM Incorporated for owner's representation in the Public Safety Headquarters project. Item D4 is a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Armco Industries for roofing and waterproofing consulting services in relation to the roof of the Victoria Public Library building in the amount of $58,000. And item D5 is a resolution approving the purchase of furniture for the Public Safety Headquarters from Spencer and Company in the amount not to exceed $799,742.
Thank you, Ms. Hilbert. Is there any motions with respect to the consent agenda?
I move we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. All right, moving then to item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution approving the purchase of one Freightliner M2106 Plus from Heil Power Track commercial 25-yard rear load truck using TIPS, the Interlocal Purchasing System contract number 230802 in the amount of $266,887.
Welcome back, Mr. Lysak.
Good evening again. So I've got a quick presentation, and I'm going to cover both purchases with one, if council's okay with that. So we talked back when I gave my annual report about how long it takes to get trucks and the need to put in purchase orders early in order to get in line to get trucks in a reasonable time. And so what we're looking to replace is we have 3 automated trucks that are 2016 models, And we have a rear load truck that is a 2007 model. So it's an 18-year-old truck. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about a replacement on trucks. So we do 7 years for automated trucks normally. Now, if you'll remember when I talked, I said that we've pushed that out to 9 years. That was okay when I could get a truck in 4 months. Now, if we wait till October, it could be a year, year and a half, because we're getting in line with all the other cities that are approving trucks in October as well. So that's one reason. We do 10 years normally on a rear loader. Why the difference? Well, an automated truck has a lot of moving parts. A rear loader really has just the packing blade in the back. It doesn't have the arm and a packing blade and everything else. So those trucks have a lot less wear and tear. We use them to pick up brush. And so the wear and tear is quite a bit less. And so, again, we haven't had to replace those. That truck, like I said, is 18 years old. But we've got a decision to make. Do I put a new transmission in a truck that's 18 years old or buy a new truck? And, you know, common sense says we need to get a new truck. So estimated delivery time, that's if I order now or put in a PO now. I would not pay for these trucks until the new budget is approved by council, which would be after October 1st. But if I put in the POs now, I would receive these trucks by the end of the year for the most part. We're looking automated trucks 8 to 10 months. Rear loader 7 to 9 months. That's depending on when I get the PO over to them so that we get in line. If I waited till October, we would probably be adding 4 to 6 months to those numbers. And then I'll answer any questions.
Any questions?
What do we do with the old trucks?
The old trucks, so 2 of the automated trucks, I have robbed every part that I can get off of them. They will be sold as scrap. The others will be traded in. The rear loader will be sold. Someone will purchase it, and they can put a new transmission in it, but I'm not going to.
Very good, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, so essentially, we're just committing to budget these in our next budget cycle, but we want to go ahead and get them on order, so we're not waiting a year and a half.
We would issue the PO, Roger would issue the PO from Fleet. So what it would do is put us in line for construction of these trucks. I would not receive them, nor would I pay for them until after October 1, when we start the new budget year.
Okay, great. All right, well then, are there any motions with respect to item E1?
Motion to approve item E1.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And then Ms. Hilberg, if you'll call item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution approving the purchase of 3 automated trucks, 2026 Max LR64 with a Heil 28-yard Python body from Vanguard Truck Center using the TIPS Interlocal Purchasing System, contract number 240901, in the amount of $1,406,947.26.
All right, thank you. Are there any motions on E2?
Motion to approve item E2.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on E2? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? E2 passes. Thank you, Mr. Lacy.
Thank you.
All right, jumping down to section F, city managers reports. Mr. Garza, I believe you have a presentation for us.
I do. This one probably will be 30 minutes, but it's an important topic. And so I'm providing an update on behalf of the Compensation and Benefits Committee, which of course includes several of your colleagues. And I will introduce them, I guess, formally here in a couple of slides, and they may want to interject at that time with any comments regarding this effort. But this was an effort that, of course, began never, because it's not, there we go. Did you move it? Okay. All right. This effort began at the conclusion of our budget development process last summer, leading into fall. For context, you may recall that last year we had a very robust conversation about just compensation and benefits, which of course led to us or myself making a proposal that ultimately, evolved over time, and it ended up changing. And so we thought, and under the mayor's guidance and leadership, that it'd be a great idea to involve council earlier in the process, at least some members of council earlier in the process, to help guide that a little better than what we normally do, right? And of course, normally the pay program recommendation is literally something that myself along with staff develop basically almost all on our own. And by the time we, expose all of council, it's basically already been set up. And so this committee has been meeting with the purpose of basically establishing a recommendation that further enhances our pay program to provide some immediate relief because of the problem statement that we shared last year, which to some extent continues today. And I'll share some figures with you highlighting that, while at the same time, and probably more importantly, being mindful of the long-term financial sustainability of the city. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to commit to something that, of course, it might put us in a bind in the future. And as I alluded to, the committee's made up of three council members, Councilmember La Garza, Lofgren, and Butler, of course, myself, our CFO, and our HR director. And at this moment, I'll turn it over to any one of them if they'd like to say a few words.
Well, I would. Haven't been an employee of the city for 31 years, and since then, a city councilman for several years. I want to say this is the most robust and, to me, it's a very elegant compensation plan. I think the previous administration didn't do any justice or any favors for the police department and fire department, and this plan does. We spent a lot of time, a lot of hours, and I think Jesus Garza, the city manager, and Gilbert Reyna, the finance officer, deserve a lot of credit for this. And I want to thank April Butler and Mark Lofgren for all their input on this. I think we're headed finally in the right direction after years of neglect.
You knew I'd have something to say. I want to express my sincere appreciation to Mayor Crocker for appointing me to serve on the Compensation Subcommittee. I believe it's been a truly collaborative effort between those of us on council and the city staff. I also think that we have all gone into it with a goal of aligning employee compensation with market values. The process has been thoughtful, it's been data-driven, and it's been focused on long-term impact. I believe that the presentation today will reflect that diligence, that engagement, and that investment that this committee has brought to the table, and I fully support the presentation that Mr. Garza is about to give, and that I hope that today's discussion sets a strong precedent for how future subcommittees might be useful in situations such as this.
Thank you.
I have sat in the audience since 2013, and I've been up here for a few years, and there has never been a subcommittee of council members on a topic. And that's how important we feel this topic is. I think it's important. It's kind of ironic, this is Public Service Recognition Week or month, when we wouldn't have a great city without all the employees. And we took this very seriously, and we spent a lot of time on it. And we're not done, by the way. We expect to meet more often and discuss other issues. So, and I hope you appreciate all the time and energy that was put into this. We had more meetings than city council meetings, a lot more than city council meetings. We met almost every Monday for a long period of time. And I think it's a good plan. I think you'll like it.
Well, and let me just say, chime in, thanks to each of you for, I know it was a lot of time, I know it was a lot of work, I know there were some hills and valleys, as there always are in these things, and obviously, thanks to Mr. Garza, Mr. Reyna, and Ms. Campos as well. I know that there's a lot of work went into this, and you guys have my appreciation for doing the job that you were asked to do. And Mr. Garza, with that, I'll let you get on with the recommendations.
Awesome. All right. Please feel free to interject at any point with questions. Obviously, it's important that we all get a good understanding of what we're recommending. I blame allergies for this. I apologize. So I already alluded to this, but I'll reiterate that some of the key goals of the committee, which of course is to attract and retain high-quality employees, strengthen employee satisfaction, which always are correlated and is correlated to the continuity of essential city services. All of these goals are in spite of some recent attempts. And many of you have seen me and know that I'm always thinking about trying to provide some history and some context because I think it's important. Because it's always been a priority for us to focus as much as we can on our employees. And so this is just a really quick recap on what we've been able to do over the last 5 years. I'm not going to go into major detail with it, but you may recall from last year's presentations that we did undertake a study in 2020 that utilized 2019 data pre-pandemic. That's key, pre-pandemic data that basically outlined the recommendations that we proposed over several years, beginning with fiscal year 21. And so you'll see that in fiscal year 21, we implemented a new PD and fire step program that was in response to that study that we conducted in 2020, which did suggest that we were behind market, but not significantly. And so we made those adjustments. And of course, I'm not going to delve into details on the benefit side, but there was obviously also been enhancements to the benefit side. And so there was a benefit in the compensation and benefit front in 21 that totaled roughly $1.4 million. And as I go through this slide on the next, there is this cumulative, I always mess that word up. Cumulative.
Allergies.
Yeah, blame allergies. Totals at the bottom to give you a sense of what that total investment in our employees has been in that 5-year period, because it'll help in highlighting, to Councilor De La Garza's point, the comparison between what we've been able to do in the last 5 years compared to what we're proposing. And so in any case, so we obviously made some adjustments in fiscal year 21. That was when we implemented phase 1 of the pay recommendations. We followed that back up in fiscal year 22 and so on and so forth. And so you can see that by the time we get to fiscal year 25 that we're in now, we're already surpassing $5 million in impact that we've been able to invest in our employees over the last 5-year period. I'll remind you, though, that for fiscal year 25 specifically, that $846 budget impact was a net impact, but not the true gross impact of that program, because we froze 10 positions. So you may recall that we froze 10 positions in fiscal year 25 to be able to help afford that roughly $1.4 million program. And so in actuality, the benefit that we've been able to offer our employees exceeds that $5.2 million once you look at it from a growth standpoint. But nonetheless, just keep that in mind that over the last 5 years, it's been a little over $5 million, and that we have tried to do everything we can in that through the budget development process to invest in our employees. Councilmember De La Garza, mentioned specifically police and fire, and we did, and we have since fiscal year 21, every year honored the commitment of the STEP commitments that were rolled out in fiscal year 21. That was one of the biggest feedbacks and criticisms that I heard in 2020, that there was just inconsistency when the city would afford and grant these STEP increases. But we have done so since fiscal year 21. So that's just a little bit of background on what we've invested over the last few years. And in spite of that, we still have some challenges. And so this just gives you a snapshot of the biggest challenges that exist within our organization, which are with police, fire, and public works. And of course, we've been very transparent with those 3 departments being the ones that have the greatest challenge. Some vacancy historical data. As of today, we do have roughly 24 vacancies with PD, and we have about 16, 17 vacancies with Public Works. Thankfully, we actually have 0 vacancies with fire right now, thanks to some creative reshuffling of the organizational structure under Chief Gavas's leadership, but that's still a challenge for us. And so these 3 departments continue to be a challenge for us, and so that was something that the committee kept in mind moving forward throughout the process. Another, I see Councilor Lofgren smirk because of the stars element of this, but we also know from the exit interviews that when we lose employees, we rate low in the salaries and benefits item on the questionnaire on that exit interview. Very rarely is it an issue with the organization. As you can see, we always rate above 4 stars in supervisor rating or department rating. But you can see that we obviously fall below 3 stars in the salaries and benefits, which of course tells us something, right, about why people are leaving our organization. And people are smirking about the stars because when we shared the draft of the presentation with the committee yesterday, every one of those had 5 stars. So thank you, Nina, for adjusting and just showing the 2.77 stars. Mark, I took a ruler and I measured it, and that is 3/4 of a star there on that 3rd star. So again, that was one of the driving forces of the work that the committee undertook. One of the things that was also different about this process was that it wasn't just about data. Obviously, that was the foundation of it, but there was more to it. And so these are just some elements that went into methodology of the PAY program, the policy direction from the committee. And what we mean by that is policy direction to focus on police, fire, and public works, because the data was telling us that that's where we had the biggest challenge, right? And so there was definitely an emphasis on trying to do a little bit more in those areas. And that's an example of one of several policy directions that came from the committee. We, of course, updated the wage analysis to make sure that it was reflective of a cost of living adjustment compared to the data that we were utilizing last year. And one of the great suggestions that came out of the committee, specifically Councilman Butler, was this idea to overlay a cost of living differential, with this idea that last year when we were talking about the data, we didn't take into account what's the cost of living in Victoria compared to these other communities, because there's a difference there. And so oftentimes it's easy for us to talk about, well, you know, the city of Victoria doesn't pay as much as New Braunfels, as an example, but the cost of living is greater in New Braunfels. And so we hadn't really adjusted the data to account for that difference until this idea came forward through this committee work. And so we did do that. We adjusted the data to reflect that. And you may recall that last year, we kept verbalizing this goal of trying to reach 90% of market data. But once we actually ran this cost differential analysis, it basically resulted in 100% of market when adjusted for cost of living in Victoria. And so it further strengthened and provided some backing to the figure that was the goal in this process. So in any case, that's just one example of that. We also wanted to be mindful of tenure. So that was another one of those kind of feedbacks that we've gotten over the years from employees across the organization about this issue or this scenario where you have somebody in a position where you have multiple people in the same position making the same amount of money, regardless of how long they've been with the organization. And I'll get more into that when I get to the general population slides, but that was part of the methodology. And as I alluded to, just being mindful of our finances. In the past, the city, these are some examples of tools that the city has utilized in order to put together a pay program. And so, for example, in the past, the city has undertaken across the board increases. So, for example, we did that for fiscal year 25, right, where everybody received a 3% across the board. It's been a while since we've done this, but in the past, the city has done pay for performance as a tool to make a recommendation for pay program. We, of course, have also utilized market adjustments alignment. When we feel that positions are getting too far away, we'll make adjustments based off of solely the market. We've done lump sum or stipends in the past as part of just the city's effort to try and put together a pay program. And this is important because what we're basically recommending for fiscal year 26 includes an element of market adjustment, while at the same time a lump sum or stipend option. The plan for fiscal year 26 that I'll be presenting to you does not include across the board increases and does not include pay for performance. Those are things that we can certainly contemplate as part of putting together fiscal year 27 and beyond. But for purposes of fiscal year 26, the focus was on market adjustment and lump sum or stipends, and I'll explain that further in a second. To help this presentation flow in as smooth and easy fashion as I'd like it to, we're dividing how I present the information to you into these categories. because it makes sense to, because of the different impact across these different subgroups. It matches the policy direction to focus on police, fire, public works. And I'm going to give you an example of with solid waste in that oftentimes our challenge has nothing to do with another city, but has to do with private sector competition, like is the case with solid waste. And then, of course, I'll summarize general population. One of the things that was also different about how we tried to approach this was let's look at not just the pay, but let's look at other elements that impact pay moving forward. And so, for example, the second item on this table shows that there's a concern within the police department that there are too many steps in the STEP program that existed. And sure enough, there was basically a dozen steps in that STEP program. And if every step is supposed to be 2 years, it was over 20 years that it would take a police officer to sort of max out with their pay. And so the common sort of sentiment that I would receive from PD is, you know, I'm basically retirement eligible after 20 years and I'm still not maxed out, right? And so that was one thing that we attempted to address with the structure of the STEP. And so again, it wasn't just looking at what is the starting pay for police or what's the starting pay for the different positions, but let's look at the structure of the STEP itself. And it's not moving on me. Nothing. Okay. So this is basically the recommended STEP program for police. It shows 6 steps. So again, in the design of the STEP, we're addressing several concerns. We're addressing the concern that the previous STEP program or the existing STEP program just had way too many steps. We're also addressing and cleaning up the way that we illustrate the value of the steps. And so the previous STEP, for example, did not include in the document itself any specific guidance on what is the years of service that is attached to these steps, which created some confusion about which step an officer felt they ought to be in, right? And so we try to clean that up through how we present the information. You'll see that we also just structured it differently so that it's easier on the eyes from left to right to show progression throughout somebody's career. And so I'll briefly highlight that the police officer position is proposed to go up by 14%, and so that's what gets it up to the $60,000 starting salary. It was very important for the police chief to hit that $60,000 minimum in order to remain competitive as much as possible in the region. I mentioned earlier trying to use data to back up where we were investing our dollars. The data certainly backed up that where we were losing the majority of our officers was in that senior police officer, detective ranks. And so those positions went up by 17% to try and tackle that. And so this is an example of utilizing data as well as policy direction to be able to put money where we think it could make a difference with the turnover and the recruitment issues that exist with PD. I won't walk you through every single one of these, but just know that as part of laying this out, we also cleaned up any potential overlap that might be an issue. And so, for example, you'll see that as a senior police officer, you'll max out at $75,000, but when you promote to sergeant, it jumps up to $81,000. And so it alleviates any possible compression throughout the promotional process of anybody in the police department. And so again, it wasn't just about trying to develop recommendations for starting pay, but it was trying to develop a step that made sense, was less confusing, it was easier to read and follow for anybody involved and impacted. Yes, ma'am.
This is just because I don't completely understand the STEP program. When you're promoted from one position to the next, on the STEP chart, do you go back to 0 to 2 years in that new position?
Correct.
Thank you.
It's for years in position, yes. And I'll explain that a little further in a couple of slides. And again, feel free to stop and ask questions whenever you can, or if you want. Obviously, you can do whenever you can or want. But in any case, so that's just an example of PD. Again, I don't want to oversaturate you with a bunch of data or numbers, But I will summarize it as follows. And so with the recommendation that we're putting forward with PD and the step plan for PD, it's roughly 128 employees that would be impacted by this. The total cost of that is roughly $1.4 million. And this will basically go into effect October 1st, right? Because it's going to be included as part of the budget. And one of the things that we also clarifying with this move is clarifying that, to your point, Councilwoman Scott, that it's that time and position that is the metric that we're using to determine when somebody's in their respective step. And we're also clarifying that when they are due that milestone, that it occurs after their anniversary date. Because we've also been inconsistent with how we go about implementing and applying the step. And so this clarifies that an officer will receive that 3% pay bump after their anniversary date. It just makes it less confusing because obviously they know when their anniversary date is. And so again, we're cleaning up a variety of different things. One of the other things too that I forgot to mention from this is that we also decreased the value of the steps for ranked positions. And so part of the thought process behind this was to emphasize on the lower ranked positions, which in this case would be police officer, senior police officer. And so beginning with sergeant and above, the value of those steps is only 2%. Historically, the value of the steps have always been 3% for all ranks. But we left it at 3% for police officer and senior police officer, and then adjusted it for the further ranked positions to 2%. So with fire, I'm going to move on to fire. Very similar in terms of some issues with being behind or not being competitive with pay, I should say. On the fire side, their unique concern that was specific to fire was this lack of clarity between fire and EMS. You may recall that the EMS division within fire is something that was created during the pandemic as a way to try and alleviate the pressure that the fire department was feeling at the time due to the pandemic. It had been a very, very long time since the city had undertaken a structure within the fire department that delineated a division of EMS and one of firefighting. It had been a truly combined department for decades by that time frame. It had been a long time. And so part of what was going on or is going on with the fire department is these growing pains as the department evolves and shifts into having these two divisions once again. And so as part of developing the step for the fire department, again, it wasn't just about looking at starting pay or whatever, but it was how do we develop a step structure that addresses these other concerns. And so one way to do that was to basically create multiple step structures. And so this step structure is reflective of what the track would look like for a firefighter only, which again is also 6 steps. And again, very clearly defines the years of service associated with each step and so on and so forth. In this particular case, lieutenants and above are also at that 2%. And so we've kept the lower positions at 3% and the ranked positions at 2%. And to help alleviate some of the confusion that existed between firefighter and EMS, we actually developed an EMS track-centric step to, again, address those issues that existed. And so I mentioned earlier that the fire department is fully staffed, and a big reason why the fire department is fully staffed is because now we do have EMT onlys that we're hiring into the fire department. When the EMS division was created a few years ago, we were basically just hiring paramedics, and that's the paramedic crew leader position. And so now we've added the ability to hire EMTs. And so that's why the fire department is fully staffed currently. But this presents an opportunity to better delineate a progression plan for anybody that wants a career in the EMS track. And so this type of step plan achieves that. If you're wondering, why is there a column, addressing overtime or mentioning overtime, it's because the shift schedules are completely different between fire and paramedics. And that also further validated the idea of having 2 completely different step documents for each. So for example, on any sort of traditional model for the fire department side, they're working roughly 2,900 hours. And on the EMS track, because their schedule is different, they're working like 2,100. And so it's just a different schedule altogether. And because the schedule of the EMS is different, it comes with a built-in guaranteed overtime element to it. And that's why it was important for us to convey it in a way that would tell somebody that gets hired that if you just worked your base schedule, it contemplates some overtime. And so that's why it's reflective that way. And then just to recap of the fire, 123 employees impacted. So very similar in the number of employees that are impacted in comparison to the police department. And the cost impact for this change for the fire department is $1.3 million. And so again, very similar in terms of size and cost of the level of investment that we're recommending for police and fire. And before I move on, any questions on the fire? I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but.
Not a question, just a comment for those that might be listening and are not as familiar as some of us that have been living and breathing it. It would be beneficial to maybe clarify that the 3% and the 2% is just the step, but there is a market adjustment for overall pay as well that varies depending on the years in service or entry level or all of those things.
Yes,
So
thank you.
just-
Thank you for that reminder, Councilwoman Butler. Similar to the police department, we also looked at the data to try and figure out which positions within the fire department are the ones that we are losing the most. And that data looked completely different than the police department, where we're losing the majority of folks on the fire side is in the ranked positions. It's in the engineer position. It's in the lieutenant position. It's in the captain position. And so while we did adjust starting pay for firefighter, and that did get adjusted at roughly 10%, there were pretty significant increases to the ranked positions to the tune of over 20%. And that was backed up by not only the independent data from the study, but also backed up by what we were seeing with losing folks. We were literally losing lieutenants and captains that were literally leaving us to be a frontline firefighter in a different department to make more money because that's how far behind we were with what we were paying lieutenants and captains, as an example. And of course, it helped, having Councilman De La Garza in the subcommittee because he obviously knows some of the history associated with the fire department, and he and others have been able to validate the sentiment that over the years, the city would focus market adjustments on the fire department side on the starting level, on the starting pay, but never equally invested in the ranked positions. And so you multiply that over 10, 15 years, and you ended up with major compression issues in the fire department because they just had gone unaddressed. And so if it seems severe or drastic that what we're recommending is significant pay bumps for the ranked positions, that's reflective of how far behind we ourselves were with keeping up with making those adjustments in those ranked positions. And again, the data backed it up through not only the data and looking at what other cities that we compared ourselves to pay, but also what we were hearing from the people that we were losing. And I'll repeat it. We were losing lieutenants and captains that would intentionally leaving our department to go be a firefighter somewhere else, right? They're literally going to an environment where they've lost rank because they were making more as a frontline firefighter than they would as a leader in our structure. And so this addresses that. So thank you for that reminder, Councilwoman Butler. On the EMS side, the adjustment is more minimal. It's in the single digits. And one of the things that we've learned through this process is that we do need to recalibrate and adjust our certification, our paramedic certification program to more closely align with the individuals that are working in ambulance every single hour that they're on shift, which of course are the folks in the EMS track. And so while the percentage increases on the EMS track aren't as significant as they are on the firefighter side, we're currently working on a new certification program that would help create that better balance, and hopefully a certification program that financially rewards to a greater degree folks that are within this track. Okay, so any other questions on police and fire? Those are obviously big ones. Okay, so moving on to Public Works, one of their specific issues was not only again, every department has issues with not being or having challenges with turnover, recruitment, et cetera, but every department has very unique things. In the Public Works department, there was a very unique issue where there was lack of clarity around progression, which was just very confusing, kind of handled in a very ad hoc basis. And so on top of trying to invest money on positions where we're seeing the greatest turnover in public works, we also took advantage of this opportunity to help clarify the lack of clear progression with public works. And so this gives you an example of what the ultimate recommendation and what the result of that effort was, which is now it's very clear for anybody that starts within streets, traffic, utilities, what their potential progression is with our organization. The data backed up and showed that with public works, where we were losing the most people and where we're struggling the most is in the maintenance worker position and the utility crew leader position, or crew leader positions. And so the maintenance worker position was adjusted 7%. The utility crew leader position was adjusted 13%. Most of the vacancies within public works are in the utility division, and so hence the heavier investment on the utility crew leader position. But again, one of the positive outcomes of what we've put together for public works is this very clear progression path. There's roughly 125 employees that are impacted by what we're proposing for public works to the tune of about $400,000. And then I mentioned the uniqueness of solid waste or environmental services division, where the competition isn't a city. It wouldn't have had come up in any of the data analysis that we conducted, because we don't lose these folks to other cities. We lose them to Waste Management, Republic, White Trash. And so what we did was something very unique with this group, because it was basically using a completely different set of data sets and a completely different methodology on how to be competitive with these private sector companies in our region. And so the recommendation for solid waste was to basically increase the starting pay from a little over $16 to $19. And if you're thinking, well, that's still not as much as these, what we have going for ourselves is the total benefits package that we offer. Most of these private sector companies, while they might pay more per hour, don't offer retirement, may not offer health benefits to the extent that we do. And so even though we are proposing to be at the $19 an hour, there's all these other benefits that come with being an employee of the City of Victoria that we think will make a difference, and has already made a difference in this particular department. And so if you're wondering, basically this equates to roughly a 10 to 15% pay increase to the varying drivers within solid waste. And that's to a cost impact of roughly $124,000. And then we get to everybody else, and what we refer to as part of this conversation, general population. As a refresher, our recommendation for the general population was based off of the data and the compensation study, as we've alluded to, but also looking at this tenure factor. And the way that we calculated the tenure factor was basically just multiplying 1.5% of movement into the pay range or into the hourly rate to go into effect every 2 years of service, was how we calculated that. Again, to try and create some separation in scenarios where you have individuals in the same position, but you have different years of service. Trying to alleviate some of that compression even in that scenario. And so that's basically what we did. We put a formula together, and Wesley deserves a lot of credit for this. He took a lot of the data that came from our third-party consultant and developed his own Excel document and created his own formulas. And so Wesley deserves a lot of credit for what the data put out for recommendations for employees. But as you might suspect, and how I've been alluding to, some positions were deemed to be within market. And so out of the general population, there were only 243 positions that are being recommended for adjustments. These would go into effect in October, the same as everybody else. These are a little bit more all over the place, and so it's a little bit harder to kind of summarize what the percentage increase changes are for these individuals. But we do have individuals that are being recommended for 3, 4, or 5%, but we have others that are 7, 8, 9, 10, and we even have a few outliers where that increase was greater than 15% because the data confirmed that we were that behind market with these positions. And we've been talking internally about this reality of this recommendation being different compared to the current one where it was a 3% across the board, right? And so with that did leave 142 employees of our organization without a specific pay enhancement in their compensation, because the data validated that they were already within the range of that position. And even once you took into into consideration the longevity or the tenure factor, I should say, they were still already making more money than what that formula recommended. This wasn't a surprise in certain areas of our organization, because over time the organization has been forced to pay more than starting pay for certain positions for competitive sake. So as an example, at our utility plants, we've been forced to bring in people not at minimum of the pay range because of competition. And so these is an example of the individuals that were left out of the formula that make up the 142. However, we wanted to be mindful, and the committee wanted to be mindful of the fact that, there's a lot of uncertainty right now with inflation and other things. And so there was a basic premise and an idea that came out, which was, okay, we understand the rationale and the logic around why these 142 employees aren't being recommended for an annual increase to their hourly rate or to their salary, but what can we do to try and put some additional money in their pocket? And so that's where the idea came in to recommend a stipend, which is to the value of $1,000. And so for these 142 individuals, we would recommend a stipend. Some of those individuals are funded through grants and other means, and so if you're doing the math, trying to figure out that ain't mathing, there's other logical explanations for that. But we did also, as part of this effort, include individuals that the formula recommended a annual increase in compensation less than $500, because we just felt that if the formula was recommending that John Doe was going to increase their annual compensation by $400, we didn't feel that was meaningful enough. And so we did lump in employees that the formula recommended less than $500 and are recommending the $1,000 stipend for them as well. The way that we would implement the stipend would be doing $500 on October 1st and $500 on March 1st of the following year to spread that out. And so ultimately, it results in roughly a $3.6 million pay program. Now, you may recall at the very beginning of the presentation me mentioning that over 5 years, we had surpassed $5 million. And so what we're basically recommending is more than what we've been able to do from fiscal years 23 through 25. So what we're recommending for fiscal year 26, from a monetary standpoint, is greater than those 3 fiscal years combined. And so when we say that this is a historic level of investment into our employees, we mean that from a financial standpoint. And I'm pleased to report that we're able to do this without making any sacrifices to benefits. We are not recommending any changes to retirement plans like was the case last year. We've been able to work with the committee and our CFO Gilbert, and Gilbert deserves a lot of credit for what I'm about to go through, which is basically thinking creatively on how to fund this without impacting other benefits of our employees. And so thank you, Gilbert, for your involvement with this as well. As a way to help fund this, there was also a lot of assumptions that we had to make. As you can imagine, if the goal was to try and get something out in April, which we've done, we had to make a lot of assumptions. We don't normally finalize a pay program recommendation until the budget, right? You don't normally get a feel for what the cost of that's going to be until the summertime. But we felt that it was important, and the committee agreed that we make some assumptions so that we could come out with a recommendation earlier than normal, so that we can start to receive input. Because one of the lessons learned from last year's experience was that we perhaps waited too long to start getting in front of employees to start talking about what we were doing, what we weren't doing. We hadn't quite fleshed out some of the details to the extent that, in hindsight, we could have, so that led to some confusion. And so we wanted to prevent all of that chaos that happened last year from happening this year. And one way to do that was to obviously come out with this recommendation sooner than normal. But in order to do that, we needed to make some financial assumptions. And I'm going to walk you through these financial assumptions, because this is where then council's role comes into play when it comes to making this recommendation a reality. Last year, when we put together the recommendation for a 2-year pay program, we intentionally left a little over $1 million in the fiscal year 25 budget somewhat untouched. We used it for one-time expenditures, but we left it unallocated from a recurring standpoint on purpose to make sure that we had money in fiscal year 26 to honor the commitment that we were promising last year. And so that's what that $1.1 million is and where it's coming from. We're also contemplating, as part of these financial assumptions, that our community is going to continue to grow to the extent that it has for the last 4 or 5 years. That would provide and afford an opportunity for council during the summer to lessen the property tax rate or keep it flat, right? While at the same time increasing our revenues, right? Thanks to an increase in the NTAV and thanks to new growth and new development, right? And so we're assuming that we will receive an additional $500,000 in our general fund through property tax revenue next fiscal year. We've also made the assumption that we will increase the sales tax revenue in next year's proposed budget to account for this continual growth that we've been seeing over the last few years and just increase in sales tax revenue, right? So again, these are all assumptions. We've also seen an uptick in the last couple of years in revenue from our ambulance billing program. And so it's gotten to the point, the first year we saw the increase, we thought, something's up. But now we've seen it become a pattern. And so now we feel comfortable actually increasing formally in the proposed budget for next year, an increased revenue from the ambulance billing program to the tune of $171,000. If we shift over to the right, what you see at the top, that $225,000, that accounts for basically us recommending that going into fiscal year 26, we're now at the point where we feel comfortable transitioning our retiree medical liabilities to the OPEB that was set up over 10 years ago and that the city's been pumping money into every year to help build up that pot. And so this $225,000 basically comes from reassigned dollars that we normally would put into our self-insurance fund that we no longer would, because now the retirees' liabilities aren't coming from our self-insurance fund, they're coming from the OPEB. Does that make sense? That's been something that we've intentionally been delaying as much as possible to help that pot build up, interest income and us continue to put money in it. But in light of what we're recommending for a pay program moving forward, it's time to make that shift. So that's what that accounts for. We're also accounting for some funds to be available in our post-closure fund that we can utilize for this purpose, where we're basically counting on future growth to come in and cover that expense moving forward. So there is a certain level of risk that's involved with these assumptions, but at some point, we're gonna have to make it. And we felt that if we're gonna make it, let's make it for the benefit of our employees. And so we're accounting for $300,000 from our post-closure fund. You've heard Daryl in several presentations talk about the opportunities at the landfill. And again, those tuning in, and you may or may not know, anybody that's listening, that the royalties that we receive from the landfill go to our general fund. I think oftentimes people assume that the royalties from the landfill go into the environmental services fund, but that's not the case. The royalties at the landfill go straight into the general fund. This provides a very, very unique opportunity for us, especially with these opportunities that are coming up at the landfill, right? The expansion, not only the expansion in capacity, but the ability to take certain level of hazardous waste. This puts us in a prime position to be able to increase our royalties from the landfill. Not to mention the fact that the contract with the company that's running the landfill expires, right, at the end of 2027 has been discussed, and that we've begun undertaking a process to have a new contract, which the plan is to structure that in a manner that increases that royalty to an even greater degree, right? And then we're also accounting for a decision from council on establishing the stormwater utility. And that would produce roughly $400,000 in savings, if you will, that currently are coming out of the general fund to go towards stormwater-centric expenses that would be taken up and absorbed by a new stormwater utility once that's set up. And I get that we haven't set it up, but this is an example of an assumption that was made as part of this process. And so basically, the next steps on top of fine-tuning the pay program recommendation based off of feedback that we've been getting as we've been rolling it out, is basically over the next couple of months, continue to work with all of you now on these assumptions and how to make them a reality. And if any one of them doesn't pan out, well, then we'll obviously have to have conversations about, well, where else can we adjust things? are we going to end up having to make some cuts somewhere to make up that particular loss? Because obviously now we're on the hook, right, for this pay program that we've made public and that we've begun rolling out. And so I look forward to working with you over the next 2 months on all of these assumptions and all of these efforts, which of course would be incorporated and be part of the budget development process going into fiscal year 26. This evening is intended to be an update for you on where this is. This is not an action item, right? There usually is not an action item specific to a pay program. All of that is handled through the budget process. And that's the way that we intend to handle it now moving forward after today. And so I'm happy to entertain any additional questions, comments, or concerns.
What kind of feedback I know you shared this, I believe, with administration, PD and fire, and other department heads. What kind of feedback are you getting just on this kind of concept?
I would say that the common questions that we're getting are, one, okay, that's great, I get it, I follow the logic, but do we have to wait until October to implement it, right? Because that does seem, like far away. If you're an employee that, struggling to put food on the table and you're eager to improve your income, and we're basically suggesting that this is something that would go into effect October 1st. And so obviously the fiscal year 25 budget that we're working off of currently obviously doesn't account for this increased investment in personnel related expenditures. But even if we reference this, how we're proposing to pay for it, right, isn't even money that even is available right now, right? That $1.1 million that I'm referencing that we carried over isn't available until next fiscal year. The increase in revenue and property tax, sales tax, et cetera, is not available until next year, right? There obviously hasn't been a decision on the stormwater utility. And so that's why this has to wait until October 1st, because it's part of the budget development process going into next fiscal year. The second thing that I would say is coming out of this is, and it varies, because obviously what I've presented to you suggests that, we're recommending something that does positively impact certain employees to a greater degree, and some employees not as much, right? And so with the departments that we're seeing the greatest turnover, police, fire, and public works, time will tell, right? Time will tell if they'll make a difference with retaining individuals to better. Time will tell if we're able to recruit individuals better. But there certainly was a sentiment with both police and fire that they felt pleased. One of the common remarks I received from them was, "This is better than I thought it was going to be." And so I'm hopeful, and I know the chiefs are as well, that this can help stop the bleed with those specific departments. Obviously, with the general population, it's different because those percentage increases aren't as high, and we have employees that aren't slated to get an adjustment to their annual salary and fall under the stipend. They understand why the recommendation is what it is, and obviously their primary request is that obviously we're mindful of them going into fiscal year 27, which I agree, right? I think this process intentionally was intended to help address the needs of our organization that were the most severe, which I think was the right move. But obviously there are other needs in our organization that will need to be, addressed just as aggressively as we're pursuing certain departments with this plan. We obviously don't have the financial resources to be equally aggressive across the board, right, with every single position in the organization. And so I would say that the sentiment around or coming from the general population is, we understand this is the pressing need. I get it. But what do the future years look like, right? Is that same level of aggressiveness going to come back around and catch my position or my department later, right? And to Council Member Lofgren's point, that's the kind of work that we want to continue working on with the Compensation Committee, because this isn't a one and done, effort.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments?
I'd like to say, I'd like to thank Gilbert, because this funding strategy was really Gilbert. And a lot of these things are very conservative numbers, and some of them are very solid numbers. There's one up here, the pending thing for the stormwater is the only one that and that we have to decide on. But the other ones are very solid, and some of them are very conservative numbers. So I feel good about the funding strategy. Even if one of them falls through, I think the others will come in better than. So, just my opinion.
Sure, thank you.
And to speak to what Mr. Garza just said, I think one of the goals of the subcommittee coming back to council is that our recommendation would be that we continue with market analysis, that we continue looking at these numbers so that that population that may have been missed this time, should those numbers change, we can grab those so that we're never in a position where we're so far behind as we've been in the past, regardless of what department it is, that we're playing catch up, that we're always ahead of that. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I'll end that question with this, right? Because as I mentioned, these are tools that are, in our toolbox. And so, again, we're focusing in fiscal year 26 with market adjustments and the lump sum aspect of this. But there might be opportunities in future years to focus on all of the above, or just, or maybe just an across the board, right? We did that in fiscal year 25, right? So those are the types of conversations that we'll continue.
Other questions?
No comment. I'd like to thank the subcommittee for all the hard work you guys put in. This was robust. You guys busted your butts and took it seriously, and I think came up with an excellent plan. And I'd like to thank staff as well for all their hard work. It's not perfect. I'd love to achieve perfection, but it's a huge step in the right direction. It's a huge step compared to what's been done in the past. So I'm very proud of the work you put in, and I'd like to thank the mayor for setting up the subcommittee and making this a priority going forward.
So, Scott.
And I have a couple of nitty-gritty questions because you all understand this, and I'm still trying to put some of it together. So my first one is, and it's kind of an implementation question. There's something about an anniversary date when things become effective. Is that just when you first set up and implement this, or is that each time that they move into an answer for that? You can just tell me that.
It's across it applies in those scenarios. So, so if somebody's moving from step 1 to step 2, that'll take place immediately following their work anniversary. If somebody promotes and shifts up, from senior police officer to sergeant, as an example, well, obviously their pay is going to go up the moment that they promote to sergeant, and that'll create a new anniversary date for them, because now it would then be based off of the date that they became a sergeant, and then it starts all over for them.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Based off their work anniversary.
I was kind of hearing it as you would promote them and they would wait until their work anniversary in order to get any benefit from that, but that's not.
No. When somebody promotes, it's basically changing jobs, and when you change jobs, you're gonna improve your pay there. Yeah.
It's just in the nitty-gritty of hearing it. And also, you said something about that in your calculations, you considered cost of living adjustment. I forget what the words were that you called it. And I thought that was a great idea, and I appreciated you doing that. But how are you using that in your presentation of this? Or are these numbers actual numbers, or are they reflective of cost of living calculation?
They're reflective of the cost of living adjustment calculation, yeah. So basically the target stayed the same. So, last year, right, we were referring to the target as 90% of market. We adjusted all of that data from last year and added a 2.5% cost of living adjustment to that data. But the target remained the same because the cost of living adjustment validated that that target of 90% was truly 100% when adjusted for a cost of living factor to Victoria. So how it should be communicated, and maybe I shouldn't even have had described it that way, but in full transparency, that's how it is. And so basically the message is that the data that we utilized to validate whether positions were within market or not is basically 100% of the data when adjusted for the cost of living differential of what it costs to live in Victoria.
Okay.
And we utilized the same cities that were in that study, which was Bay City, Baytown, Bryan, College Station, Georgetown, Missouri City, New Braunfels, San Marcos, Seguin. We utilized all the same cities from that study from last year in calculating what's the cost of living in all of those communities and how does it compare to Victoria. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but how it's embedded in this is that it's in the data.
Okay, great. No, seriously, thank you, committee, for taking stuff like that and understanding it and putting it in the data so that we can ask these simple questions. But thank you.
Any other questions? Well, again, to echo, obviously this is a big step forward for us, I believe. And, we've, those of us that haven't been in the weeds as deep as you three will do so as part of our budget process and ask questions. And we certainly appreciate the work that you put in and the recommendation, and look forward to learning some more about the nitty-gritty, as Ms. Scott put it, going forward. So thank you all for your work, and I think this is a big step forward for us and something that we can really build on. So, all right.
Thank you. Oh, one last, thank you, Nina. Thank you for the presentation. She helped put this together. So kudos, thank you for that as well.
Thank you for the stars.
Very good. All right, I believe that concludes our action items and city manager report. I think we will have an executive session, so we will take a short 10-minute break and be back in executive session at 7 o'clock.
The City Council will recess for executive session on the 6th day of May 2025 at 6:50 p.m. Subject matter is as follows: Texas Government Code 551.087, 551.072, and 551.071.
One thing he didn't make clear, right now, if you're in the STEP program, and say your step is, right now, you don't get the pay until October. It doesn't start until October. The new thing is, whenever your anniversary is, that's when the new step starts. Right now, it's not that way. They have to wait until the next fiscal year. So they could go 2.5 years instead of